Welcome to episode number 28 of Questions with Father here on the SSPX Podcast. In the past months, we've been producing a series of episodes on the crisis in the church and haven't released any new episodes of our series that really started the SSPX Podcast, Questions with Father. If you're unfamiliar with this series, how it works is listeners send in questions and we ask Father 2 or 3 of these questions to make up one episode. In the past, we've talked about things like, when should I make a general confession? Or, is yoga okay? Or even topics that are a bit lighthearted, like, can I enjoy a kosher pastrami sandwich? Or buy food that is certified halal, like a delicious kabob? Well, in this episode, we're tackling one question that is very often posed to our priests. So we decided to make a full episode on this one question. Simply, it's, Father, can I go to any Latin Mass I want? Are all Latin Masses the same? Father Robinson and I recorded this episode back in December, and we're releasing it now in the middle of our series on the crisis in the church when we're looking at the Novus Ordo Mass. We figured it fit perfectly into this series at this moment, so it'll drop into your podcast feed right after the episode where we've looked at a similar question, whether or not you should attend the Novus Ordo Mass. So, since we recorded this earlier, there is a little bit of overlap. Father does reiterate some of the same points that we made in the last episode about the danger of the Novus Ordo, but it's worth reviewing and it all serves to get to the answer that one of our listeners asked. Again, if you're not familiar with the Questions with Father series, I'd suggest going back to sspxpodcast.com/questions, and there you'll see all of the episodes, or just scroll back in your podcast feed. Because you're subscribed with Apple Podcasts and Stitcher or Spotify, right? Anyway, sorry for the longer than normal intro. Let's get right into Questions with Father number 28 with Father Robinson. Well, welcome to the SSPX Podcast, and we are doing an episode of Questions with Father, which we have not done in several months, so this is like getting back on a bike and riding again. Father Robinson, you and me, I think we can just do this with our eyes closed at some point.
Well, I think we're getting a little rusty, Andrew. That's what I'm worried about. But as long as we have that intro music introducing me, I think it'll all be good.
As soon as we hear that, we just go right into it. It works. Well, Father, we're going to be asking and answering one question for this episode, and this is a question that has come up probably multiple times for you in your duties as a priest, and it's a question that we get answering emails and so forth on the sspx.org website. And that is simply, Father, should I attend fill in the blank Mass? So whether someone is talking about a fraternity Mass or Ecclesia Dei or an indult Mass or an independent priest. So let me boil down the question this way, Father. Just because a priest is saying the Latin Mass, does that make it okay? And does that fulfill our obligations? And should we as traditional Catholics go to it?
Yeah, well, this Andrew is a really huge question, and it's as you say, often posed by the faithful, by our own faithful. Perhaps they're going on a vacation or something, and there's no society Mass there, and they say they just want the priest that they trust, which is us, to tell them what we think about a non-society traditional Mass. Of course, since the motu proprio of Benedict XVI in 2007, so the past 13 years, the traditional Mass has really been spreading everywhere. That motu proprio really happened at the request of the Society of St. Pius X. And I think that showed that the Society, we are not just in this for ourselves. It's not just sort of like we just want to promote our brand.
Right.
We want to be the only show in town.
Right.
But we just want the extension of tradition throughout the church. So we requested that the Pope give a universal freedom for the celebration of traditional Mass. He granted that. Since that time, we've had many occasions to train priests who are interested in the traditional Mass for the celebration of the Mass. And so we're very happy to see the spread of the traditional Mass. But when it comes to, we like that in general, but when an individual soul comes and says, Father, there's this Mass over here, there's a traditional Mass over here, should I attend it or should I not? It can be quite complicated. Okay. So maybe we can try to sort that out a little bit.
Sure. And so I guess just very briefly, we would say that going to a Novus, just to set our boundaries here, we're not talking about going to the Novus Ordo Mass, Mass in English according to the new order. We're talking about a Latin Mass that is said according to, say, the 1962 Missal or 1955 or whatever have you. But we're not talking about the Novus Ordo Mass here.
No, we're not, and but perhaps we can just start with that in saying that the society, it is a position of the society that it's not advisable to attend the Novus Ordo Mass. So if you are traveling, you have no traditional Mass available. The only Mass available is a Novus Ordo Mass. We would say, it would be much better not to attend that Novus Ordo Mass. And we have very strong reasons for stating that. They're basically dogmatic reasons. Effectively, when we look at the way the new Mass was created, the intentions of those who crafted the new Mass, they had this purposeful desire to hide the nature of what the Mass is in order to please the Protestants. When you look at the product that they produced, the 1969 Missal, and you analyze the Mass as it is, you see some serious problems. And then when you see the aftermath of the new Mass, after it was promulgated and what it caused in the church, so many people turned off by this new form of worship in the church, and it weakened their faith or just plain led them to leave the faith. So many thousands, tens of thousands of people. You covered that somewhat with Father McFarland in that first Crisis in the Church series podcast. But really, I think the essential reason why we as society priests advise people not to go to the new Mass is because of the fact that it hides the sacrificial nature of the Mass. In the traditional Mass, you have the three elements of sacrifice, the offering, the immolation, and the communion are so clear. The traditional Mass makes it crystal clear that this is a sacrifice. In the offertory, the host and the wine are offered in the language of the prayers indicates it's a preparation for a victim. We're preparing a victim. Whereas in the new Mass, what they did is they substituted this Jewish blessing prayer, like a blessing before meals prayer. And that offertory is just seen as sort of an exchange of gifts between God and man. I give God bread and wine, and he gives me spiritual gifts back. It's not like, okay, let's get ready for a sacrifice. Then in the consecration, where you have the immolation, we have the separation of the body and blood of our Lord, symbolizing his death. The traditional Mass has the priest perform the words of consecration with separating them from the dialogue of the Last Supper. So it says, the night before he suffered, our Lord did this. And the traditional Mass has the priest stop and then bend down and then pronounce the words of the form in a little bit louder voice. And they're big in the Missal, okay?
Right.
And this all indicates that this is a sacramental action. This is not just like the reading of an epistle. You are pronouncing the form of a sacrament here. But in the Novus Ordo Mass, that consecration, it just reads like a narrative, and the rubrics do not prescribe that the priest put himself in a different posture when he pronounces those words of consecration. And then when we come to the communion, we all know about the disastrous communion experiences that people have in Novus Ordo Mass, where there's no reverence for the victim that has been offered when it's received. So, whereas in the traditional Mass there is this very, very great respect for this sacred victim that has been offered to God. So when you consider those three aspects of the Mass, the offering, the consecration, and the communion, which are supposed to be closely attached to the sacrificial nature of the Mass, in the new Mass, it's very much dumbed down, and as a result, there's a serious weakening of faith that must necessarily happen through the attendance at the Novus Ordo Mass.
So then we get into the Latin Mass itself. Again, let's assume maybe they're using the 1962 Missal, so doing the things appropriately. There is probably a little bit of gray area where we could say, Novus Ordo Mass, but said in Latin and said reverently, but that's probably not even a gray area. I probably shouldn't even say that.
Yeah, in fact, it is our position that even if you say the new Mass reverently, it's still the new Mass. I mean,
Okay.
there still is these fundamental flaws in the way the Mass itself is crafted. Obviously, it's better if it's done reverently, but still, it's seriously flawed in the way the Mass is crafted.
So when you began this part of the conversation, Father, you said the SSPX priests and the SSPX as a position as a whole recommends to the faithful or tells the faithful on a doctrinal level, not on a prudential level, not on a, well, we think you should do this, but on a doctrinal level, you should not attend the new Mass. And this is different than you telling someone maybe attend this chapel or this chapel if you're traveling.
Yeah. So I think what distinguishes the advice that we give with regards to the Novus Ordo Mass, as opposed to advice we might give to attending a Latin Mass, a motu proprio Mass, or whatever, is that with the new Mass, we argue on grounds of doctrine that the Mass itself is flawed, and so the Mass itself is a danger to your faith. Whereas, what do we do if the faithful come in and say, can I attend the very same Mass that you, Father, are saying? It's just not a society venue.
Sure.
So that's what really complicates the question of attending non-SSPX Latin Masses when it comes to the priest giving advice. It's not going to be a question of the Mass. It's exactly the same Mass. So it's really the priest needs a lot more information. It's going to be based much more on people in person. It's people and places. Who are the people involved? What sort of group? What's the venue for this Latin Mass? Is it a Fraternity of St. Peter? Is it Institute of Christ the King? Is it Sede Vacantis? Is the priest a Feniite? Is the priest a Novus Ordo priest who says the traditional Mass on a Sunday? What's the context? It might be a priest who has a very good formation. It might be a priest who has a very bad formation. Also, just the group that the priest is associated with, as I say, that will factor into it. And that, I think, is what makes it difficult for me as a society priest sometimes to give advice on these questions, and why, frankly, sometimes I will tell people, I'm effectively going to leave the choice to you. I'm going to leave the decision to you. I'm just not really in a position to advise you. Whenever the priest advises the faithful, it is a serious burden that he carries. He has to make sure that his advice is good. And in these contexts, there's often a lack of information. As a society priest, if someone asks me, I'm going to Nebraska, I'm going to Alliance, Nebraska, and there's a chapel out there that has a traditional Mass. Should I go? I'd be like, well, I have no clue who the priest is,
right.
And it's the same Mass. So there's a caution, I think, that I would have to exercise in giving that advice.
It is striking, just to kind of take a little bit of a sidebar here, Father, that and we as traditional Catholics are used to this kind of a conversation to have with our priests, with our pastors. But it really is bizarre when you think about it, that Catholics should be asking a priest, is it okay to go to this Mass or not? This is a new phenomenon in the last 50 years that the rest of the church and the rest of our history we've never had.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very strange, isn't it? You think about if you were going to Mass and under the pontificate of Pius X,
sure.
And you go to your parish priest and it's like, hey, Father, should I? Is it okay for me to go to the Jesuit chapel down the road, or the Jesuit chapel in this other town? And you'd be like, why are you asking me? That's the Jesuits.
He'd look at you. He'd look at you like you were crazy.
he might say something like, well, make sure you still put your weekly tithe in my chapel, but go ahead. But that's about it.
Right. I mean, I think it's really a testimony to the fact that there is a serious crisis in the church, that the faithful look for some sort of stability, something they can trust. And, I think we've earned that trust from a lot of our faithful, and they come to us and they want to know what's safe for them, what's safe for the practice of my Catholic life. But as I say, it gets quite complicated when it comes to giving advice with regards to attendance at non-SSPX Latin masses. So again, I want to give the right advice. I don't want to send someone to a Latin mass when there is a danger to the faith. It's not going to be the same danger as going to the Novus Ordo Mass. But if there is a danger to the faith, I don't want to say go ahead. So if for instance, I think of the fact that in some contexts, in some places where the Mass is said, there's just maybe a priest would be using hosts from a Novus Ordo Mass, or maybe the priest is in a scandalous situation. Maybe he's defected from his order. He's just doing his own thing, or maybe he's just crazy, And I would, if I knew that, I would say to the faithful, the person, no, I know who that priest is, and really, I don't think it would be safe for you to go, because of the context. This priest is very just sort of out there with his positions, and it would likely be a scandal for you. It would be a scandal to your faith if you saw the priest and you heard him preaching.
Right. So that brings up the point I was going to ask next, Father, and that is the matter of preaching. If you're attending on a Sunday or something, I guess we would have to draw the distinction a little bit between the validity and the appropriateness of the Mass itself versus the teaching, or let's say you happen to go to confession before Mass and you're traveling or whatnot. The things that go along with it, the homily, the sermon, the confession or the conversation after Mass, whatever. So those are two sort of separate things, right?
Yes, definitely. So we're obviously considering cases where the Mass is valid. The Mass is a Latin Mass. It's the right Mass. Everything's good there. But there might be problems or dangers to the faith in other regards, with regards to the priest who's saying the Mass or the group that he belongs to. So if I'm in a position where I'm able to assess and that there is a grave danger to the faith, I'm able to. I know that this priest is just really wacky, or I know that it's a diocesan priest who's just going to take the host from the tabernacle, the Novus Ordo host, for instance. Then I would be able to say clearly, it would not be advisable for you to go to that Mass. But the vast majority of the time, I wouldn't really have detailed information about what's going on at that Mass. And what I don't want to do is on the one hand, I wouldn't want to give some sort of universal blanket condemnation and just like, no, you can never go to any Mass but the Society of St. Pius X, and give the impression that there's no salvation outside the Society of St. Pius X. Right. I mean, that would be a totally schismatic mentality, as if we are the church, which is definitely not the case. But on the other hand, I don't want to just blow it off and pretend as long as it's a Latin Mass, just go ahead. I mean, there's no problem. No, there can be real problems. There's other situations where, just for what we might call political reasons, I wouldn't want to commit on saying something like, if someone asks me, they're going to Nebraska and the FSSP is there, Father, should I go to that Mass? And the thing is, I mean, the Society of St. Pius X, the FSSP have a history. Yeah. and it's like we feel like the priest who left the society in 1988 to form the Fraternity of St. Peter kind of betrayed the Archbishop. They continue to speak against us, and they they have that compromised position. And so if I were to say to a faithful, sure, go ahead, attend the fraternity mass, and they would go, well, Father Robinson has no problem with the fraternity. That's what we eventually come out.
That's what's going to come out. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that position, I might say something like, well, I can see why you might want to attend if you've got no other mass to attend on that weekend that you're in Nebraska. But I'm just going to leave that for you to decide.
Sure.
Because if I advise against, it might seem like I'm making the society to be the only path to salvation, which is not the case. And if I advise that, sure, go ahead, there's no problem, I might make it seem like really there is no difference between the society and fraternity. And in fact, there is a difference. There is a real difference. And I don't want to be disloyal to the society and Archbishop myself by pretending that it's all good.
But at the same time, you're not, like you said, this is not a situation where you only want people to go to the SSPX Mass because you're an SSPX priest and you just want to get more numbers in the door or anything like that. This is, like you said at the very beginning, the promulgation of the motu proprio, the lifting of this ban of the Latin Mass was a great thing, and we are very happy about it. But at the same time, we're not trying to keep everyone in our doors. No, it's not about getting our numbers up and getting more money in the collection plate and whatever. It's about saving souls. Right. That's what it's really about. That's the honor and glory that we want to obtain on Judgment Day, is to say that we've saved souls. So it's just that's what makes it delicate. And I think, unfortunately, when people go through this podcast that we're having and they come to the conclusion, they might be expecting some sort of like really black and white solution, and like Father's going to come out and he's going to tell us exactly what we need to do, and he's going to give us a formula, and it is kind of a letdown when there's not that clear guideline. I think that's what the faithful are often looking for. But I think it's very important for them to understand that the priest has to be careful and understand that there's limits to the advice that he can give. And this is one of those cases. I can only advise so far, and there's some situations where they just have to make the decision on themselves. I might give general principles or what have you, but I leave the application to them. It would just be, as I say, I just try to explain the reasons why it would be dangerous for me to advise to that level of detail in that particular context. Well, Father, that does help. At least we know what the parameters are. We know, well, this is the limits, like you said, of the advice that you can give. There is no clear-cut answer, just like there is no clear-cut answer in a lot of the things having to do with the faith these days, with the crisis that is happening. But we appreciate you giving us this information. And I guess if someone does have a question, they can always turn to their local priest. They can turn to the prior of their local chapel, or the priest who's helping them at their mission chapel or so forth.
Yeah, definitely. They should just ask their local priest. And what I generally do is I say what I know. I would say, well, there's this, that, and going on, but I'm not going to decide for you. And I would like to mention that there are obviously, I think, certain things that can be said. Like, I think going to a sedevacantist mass would generally be fairly dangerous. Going to resistance mass, I think, would be even more dangerous because of the scandalous situation in which they exist on a regular basis. Whereas the Fraternity, Institute of Christ the King, Institute of Good Shepherd, that's a much more normal ecclesiastical situation. It's less dangerous as a general rule. But again, it's the practical details, and the practical details are going to come down to the specific context in a lot of cases. And in those cases, we're often just not able to say which way to go. Sure.
Well, if anyone was looking for a clear-cut answer, like you said, a little bit of a disappointment, but this is, we pass along the information we have, and this is what we've done. So thank you for clarifying it, Father, as best as you can. And we look forward to having you on for another episode of Questions with Father. At some point, we are doing a lot with the Crisis in the Church series, and we have you coming up on a few episodes as well. So you won't be a stranger to us by any means.
All right, let's keep rolling with it.
All right, very good. Thank you, Father.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the SSPX Podcast. If you have the ability to support this apostolate, it is free and it always will be. So we rely entirely on your donations to continue producing these episodes. Please consider a monthly recurring donation of $5 or $10 or $20 on sspxpodcast.com. We'll be continuing our Crisis in the Church series for our next episode, number 26, which gets into the difficult but important question of how the Church could have given us the Novus Ordo Mass. And does this imply that the Church has failed in its duty? That's next time. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.